My name is Hasna. I am 19 years old. My father is a well-known merchant in the area. May God protect him. Although he never went to school, he didn't lack anything in life. Before we continue our story, you are now listening to the Untold Stories and this episode called The Beauty and the Loving Jinn. Alright, my father married my mother when she was 19 years old. She didn't get an education either. She used to play in the village until they told her to marry her cousin. My father was 20 years older than her, and she was happy, thinking he would take care of her because she was an orphan. Anyway, my father married Ahmed to Maluda and had an extravagant wedding, and after 2 years, I was born as their only child because my mother became infertile after giving birth to me. I was very spoiled. Whatever I wanted, my father would get it for me. I won't lie to you, I was vain and liked the way I looked. One day, I decided to enroll in a dance school alongside my regular studies, which I was excelling in, except for Islamic studies. I hated the teacher, and whenever I saw her, it would upset me for no reason. I always skipped that class, and when I passed my high school exams, I was so happy to be done with that subject and chose to study theater in college. Things seemed normal, relatively, at first, but over time, I started to withdraw. I would go to the college, finish my class, and head home. I stopped hanging out with my friends as before, even avoiding the boys I used to have fun with. If someone came near me, I would snap at them before they even said anything. Everyone noticed the change in me except my parents. Even though I stayed silent at home for long hours, all they would hear was music and think I was just dancing as usual. No one knew what was really happening in this house, and they didn't realize I was going through a real struggle due to the love demon. If we look at my story from another angle, we'll notice that my family gave me everything except attention to my religious side, because we were Muslims only by name. We fasted and slaughtered sheep on Eid al-Adha, but those were the only 2 things we followed from our religion. If you ask me why I did that, I'd say I didn't know. I just thought it was part of traditions and customs. As for prayer, the Quran, and remembrance, they were never heard in our house. I wore whatever I wanted, did whatever I wanted, and never took off my makeup day or night. The first strange thing that happened to me was at college. We were rehearsing for a play, and I had to laugh in an evil way in one scene. I didn't realize it until the scene was over and everyone started clapping, and the teacher said, "Wow, that was an evil laugh, like in horror movies." I told them, "Stop playing around," and laughed a little, but they kept clapping and laughing and went on with the rehearsal like normal. I went home feeling proud, thinking, what's going on? Do they want to laugh with me or at me? That night, I couldn't sleep. I was waiting for the morning to watch the recording of that session, which the teacher usually showed us to point out the mistakes we made. I went to the college early, and I was the first to enter the hall. Once everyone arrived, we just had to wait for the teacher, who was late. When he arrived, he apologized for being late and explained that he had forgotten the CD, so he went back to get it, but when he returned, the CD was missing. He was limping and kept apologizing. When he entered the hall, he took the remote control. He said, "We remember you. You turned off the projector to avoid showing the evil scene where you looked really bad." I closed my eyes and swallowed hard, trying to remember when I had turned off the projector. That's when I started doubting that I had lost my memory, as so many events happened that I didn't remember. At the time, I just wanted to see that infamous scene. They resumed watching, but not from the beginning. The teacher tried to go back to the moment where the tape stopped, but he couldn't get it to the 23rd minute where I appeared. It skipped to the 25th minute. The teacher got upset and blamed me for the tape being damaged. After finishing the viewing, we started to leave. Then, I had an idea and went back to the teacher, asking him to give me the CD so I could watch it at home. He hesitated for a long time before finally giving it to me, reminding me to return it the next day since there was only one copy. I thanked him a lot and rushed home to watch it in peace. I went straight to my room, locked the door, and started watching. When I reached the 23rd minute, I appeared on screen walking with pride, just as the role required. But then, I heard the strange laugh again, and it scared me so much that I tried to turn off my PC, but the laugh lasted for a long time. Suddenly, the windows opened by themselves, and the door handle started turning on its own. I tried to open the door to escape, but the handle turned in the opposite direction. I started screaming, but the sound was fading. I banged on the door with all my strength. When I opened my eyes, I found myself lying under the mosquito net, banging the air, and my PC was on again. How was that? Was I dreaming, or what? I wanted to grab the CD, but it was gone. I tried to convince myself that I was just dreaming. I didn't go to college or get the CD from the teacher. I went down to dinner with my family, almost in a daze, and kept repeating these thoughts in my head until I fell asleep. In the morning, the maid woke me up. I quickly dressed even though I didn't have any classes that day at the institute. I decided to go see the teacher to confirm that he hadn't given me the CD and that everything that had happened was just a dream. I went to his office, knocked, and entered. He greeted me saying, "Welcome, Hasna. You came to return the CD? You didn't delay it, did you?" I started mumbling, "I don't have a CD." He put his pen down, sat up straight, and said, "Look, Hasna, we know you're smart and you don't like it, and I know that from the beginning you didn't want that role, but that doesn't give you the right to do these childish tricks, like hiding the CD or turning off the data show when we were all watching together." He continued, but I couldn't understand anything. I just collapsed and started crying. I felt like I was being wronged, and at the same time, I couldn't find an explanation for what was happening to me. I cried until I couldn't anymore, then I heard my mom's voice. I asked, "What happened?" She said I was talking to the teacher, and then I fell and started speaking in a strange language, saying that I strangled the teacher and that only the security guard saved him. I closed my eyes and asked her to leave me alone for a moment. I turned on the TV and she left. I started watching a Moroccan film, and I stayed there for 2 hours, watching without understanding anything, as though my mind had shut down. Even though I was awake, I couldn't comprehend what was happening. They cut off the movie, and the call to prayer began. I heard Allahu Akbar, and I started feeling suffocated, as if someone was sitting on my chest. I started screaming and pulling my hair, and my mom ran to me, followed by my dad. They tried to hold me, but nothing worked. I kept pushing them away. The night passed terribly, and by morning I felt normal, like nothing had happened. The strange thing was that I didn't have any marks on my skin or hair pulled out. This was the first day of real, tangible suffering after I had thought that everything happening to me before was just anxiety or hallucinations. As the days went on, these strange occurrences kept happening, and my life turned into a nightmare. I couldn't describe it to you without getting tired, and no one would understand me except those who have experienced the same thing. It was loss, confusion, fear of the unknown, and the worst part was that no one felt for me. My mother was an ignorant person, and I chose to say ignorant, not illiterate, because there's a big difference between them. Since she started making money, she only gave it to the girls and their friends, the ones who sang and danced. They would call her by a certain name, and she never humbled herself. As for my dear father, he partnered with someone in a famous bar, and now money was coming in, and he became popular with the public, but mostly with the women who worked at the bar, each one pulling him in different directions. And all of this came at my expense, my time, and my upbringing. I reached the age of adolescence, but no one ever guided me or explained to me the changes happening in a girl's body and mind. All they gave me was money. As for decisions, I made them on my own, and bad friends took care of my upbringing. When these strange events started happening to me, my father's friends suggested that I see a psychologist. They took me to a good doctor, and my sessions with him started. He would talk to me about my thoughts, my childhood, and pointless things until the session ended. They would say, "This doctor is amazing, he cured her quickly." But they didn't know that the medications he gave me were just sedatives, and the real relief started when I laid my head on the pillow at night, and I would see the shadow of a man approaching me every night, enjoying my body however he wanted. I would be in a semi-coma, and he would leave after a while. I would scream and they would give me an injection, and I would fall asleep until morning. The suffering continued. I got tired of this doctor and his nonsense, but my family insisted on taking me. Oh, I didn't tell you about my friends. When they heard I was seeing a psychologist, they thought I was crazy and spread rumors about me throughout the institute. These friends were the ones who led me into trouble. Whenever there was a party or a celebration, I would be the one organizing everything, just to keep ourselves entertained and distracted from everything. And now, I'm sure that if they came to visit me, they would just hold me down and leave, just like I used to do with them. That's why I told my mom to tell them I was sleeping and needed to rest. Back to the doctor, I was exhausted from him, but I still had my third session with him that week. I was so tired of looking at him, but I endured. At one point, I snapped and lost consciousness. I don't remember what happened until I woke up in my usual bed, tied up. When I called my mom, the doctor's assistant, who was a very kind woman wearing a hijab, came to see me. But something strange happened. I noticed a pendant with the name of God, and she quickly moved to the other side. Before I could ask her anything, she told me that I had attacked him, biting his throat so hard that blood came out and he suffocated. He was now in intensive care. I was shocked. I really wanted to get rid of him, but not like that. At that moment, my mom came in and untied me. Before I left, the assistant gave me a note with an address of a healer. I thanked her, put the note in my pocket, and left. I regretted what I did to the doctor, not because of what happened to him, but because his medications helped me forget during the day. Now that I'm back to my old state, I feel him near me day and night, talking to me, flirting with me, and I feel his breath on my neck and whispers in my ears. The worst thing is that if a third person comes between us, especially if it's a man, the obsessive lover inside me takes over, and my body becomes a tool to hurt him. The worst part of it all is hearing the call to prayer or the Quran. One night, when my aunt was visiting us, my mom told her everything that had happened to me. She suggested that we go see a faqih who could help get rid of the spirit, no matter how expensive it would be. My mother hesitated at first, not thinking that I could be possessed, but my clever aunt convinced her. My uncle's wife reached her goal, and the next morning we were in that cursed neighborhood. As soon as we arrived, people attacked us as if they had never seen a car before. Everyone was crowding around, touching the car and the houses, and people were watching. And look at Ahmed the butcher. I heard he sells hashish to make ends meet. God knows why he came. Maybe he wanted to sell his father's land. There was a lot of chatter, and the neighbors were gossiping about us. They annoyed me more than I already was. At one point, the neighborhood elder came running toward my father, offering him food. God curse whoever doesn't feel ashamed. This guy who's now looking up to us is the same one who caused suffering for my grandfather and my father during the days of hardship. People are dangerous. Wherever you go, they judge you by money. Anyway, we left and had lunch at his place. Afterward, my father took me to the faqih, traditional healer, who was clueless. All he knew was Surah Al-Baqarah, and he sat there lying to God's servants. How many women has he separated from their husbands with his spells? But I won't talk much about it. The neighborhood is drowning in ignorance and backwardness. After the empty greetings and formalities, the faqih told them they needed to bring me to him every night after Maghrib sunset prayer, for a week. During the day, I was to drink only milk and not speak to anyone during that period. This is what happened on the first night, and they all gathered. I entered a room filled with the smell of incense, goat heads, snake skins, and strange animals. When he started his rituals, the room filled with that incense smoke. Then he began to mumble, and after that, he made me drink some water that smelled foul. I lost connection with the outside world. When I woke up, my things were disorganized, my hair was messy, and I felt sick. My father was shaking me, and when I tried to ask questions, they shut my mouth as the fki had instructed. Every night, my father gave him a bundle of money, and every night, the fki justified the cost by saying the incense was expensive and that he imported it from Sudan. Every night, I saw him taking money from a bag, but I stayed silent because I didn't have the right to speak. Finally, after that week of torment, I returned home. I spent 15 days at home, but I still felt uneasy. I missed my room, my music, and my dance clothes. I put on my dance outfit and danced wildly, releasing all the tension. This is what happened to me, and then I went to shower. The warm water started falling on my head, and I liked the feeling. I closed my eyes to enjoy the shampoo, but my hand froze in place from what I saw. I found blood coming out of the shower head, and blood was everywhere. Everything was red, and I heard the cries of small children. I closed my eyes, covered my ears, and let the water wash over me. My mom came in, wrapped me in a towel, and called the driver. They rushed me to the emergency room, and I passed out. I woke up to the sound of hospital machines and that smell that makes even healthy people sick. I found a nurse next to me, writing something and checking my blood pressure. I asked him, "Brother, can I ask you something?" He said, "Go ahead." I asked what was wrong with me. I wanted to know if what happened in the shower was real or just my imagination. He told me, "Your condition is stable now, but you lost the baby." "What baby? What are you talking about?" I was shocked. I yelled at him, "What are you talking about? Call my dad." My dad came in calmly, held my arm, and gave me an injection. He said, "This will calm you down, or it might make you lose your mind. Your dad is in shock. When you wake up, take care of yourself." Then he left. I wanted to scream again, but my tongue felt heavy, and I fell asleep. They said they gave me another dose. This is what's happening to me now. I can't even fight the jinn, spirits, and now we're adding children to the story. Or is the problem with me? Are you kidding me? Jinn? Thousands of questions flooded my mind as I lay there, staring at the ceiling after waking up from the sedative. I heard the door open, and that nurse came in. I glared at him and turned to the other side. He did his usual routine, checking my pulse and blood pressure. He asked if I was hurt anywhere, but I didn't answer. My mom and dad came in with the doctor. I was so happy and tried to hug my mom, but she pushed me away. The nurse held me back. Imagine that moment. I was in desperate need of my mom, and she treated me like that. The problem is, I didn't do anything wrong. I've never been with a man. I only hung out with guys and went to parties, but I never did anything. The doctor asked how far along I was, and they said about 2 weeks. At that moment, I screamed with all my strength and started thrashing. The people around me tried to hold me down, but couldn't. The jinn here took over. He strangled my mom until her eyes bulged out, and he started talking, looking straight into my dad's eyes. He said, "I'm the one who killed her child. I killed him because he was the Fkia's son, and even the Fki will be held accountable today." For the first time, I fainted after hearing the jinn speak. When I woke up, I started crying and told them, "I swear I didn't do anything." The nurse hugged me and said, "We believe you, don't worry." Meanwhile, the doctor gave me another injection. My dad went back to the neighborhood, and his goal was to settle things with the fki. Everything happened, and I was left alone. It dawned on me that I had been raped by the fki. My dad had given him over 5 million for the incense, and he raped me and got away with it. No! I screamed so loud it could wake the dead. More than 6 nurses came to hold me down, but they couldn't. I gave in to despair and didn't know where I wanted to go. I just wanted to escape from the fki, the traditional healer, the hospitals, the jinn, spirits, and even myself. I found myself on the roof of that clinic, ready to jump. I climbed over the railing, and only one step remained between me and death. I closed my eyes, and my entire life flashed before me. It all seemed dark. There was nothing good to remember. I only caused disasters and problems for so many people. Even if I died, no one would remember me fondly. I stepped forward with my right foot, but someone grabbed my other leg and held me until they brought me down. Oof, that nurse again. Even death is following me here. Why did you save me, brother? Why? Did you suspect me? What, sister? Did you want me to let you die and then go to jail for not helping someone in danger? This nurse is reading the law to me. Let me go. I won't let you go until I lock you in your room. And indeed, he didn't let me go. He tied my hands and left. 2 hours passed, and my dad came back. His face was pale. I asked him, "What's wrong? Did something happen to Mom?" He said, "No, it's the fki. That dog. What's wrong with him?" He told me that as soon as he arrived in the neighborhood, he found the gendarmerie and people gathered around the fkia's house. He tried to go in to see what was left, but an officer told him there was nothing to see. They found him dead, like a carcass. God protect us. His face was disfigured, his eyes bulging, and there were no fingerprints. This case caused a stir in the newspapers and was recorded as an unsolved case. But I was the only one who knew who did it. I spent that night in the clinic. I don't know why I didn't want to go home. My whole life, I've hated hospitals and their smell, but I don't know why I didn't want to leave. The nurse came in, pulled up a chair, and sat next to me, watching me silently. What's wrong with him? Don't you have work to do? Go bother someone else. He didn't answer. I just kept staring. He said, "What's wrong, Hasna? What's wrong with me? I'm human." He said, "What's your problem?" I knew why he was here and why he wanted me to talk about the jinn, but I didn't want to talk about it. He kept saying, "We're not talking about the problem we know about. Why are you acting so selfish and childish?" I started shaking my shoulders and twisting my face. He said, "What did I tell you? You're acting like a little kid." I stuck out my tongue at him and cut him off. He started playing a Marzain song in English that began with Allahu Akbar. I jumped up and kicked his legs out from under him. Suddenly, a bearded man entered the room, and subhanallah, glory to God, there was a light on his face. Mashallah, God has willed it, but to me, that light felt like fire burning me. I broke free from the nurse and lunged at the other man, trying to extinguish that light, but the jinn screamed in his face and knocked him to the ground. The nurse asked the other man to tie me up and close the door so I wouldn't escape. This was the dialogue that happened between the jinn and that good man. After that man increased his ignorance, the jinn began to speak in classical Arabic when he recited the Quran. "Who are you? And what do you want from this woman?" "I am from the jinn, originally from the Arabian Peninsula. I was traveling through your country when this beautiful woman caught my attention. When did you enter her, and why did she attract you more than other girls? It's been a long time since I inhabited her. I was passing by her house, which was filled with immorality. I heard the sound of drums and women laughing indecently, so I entered the house without any barriers. the name of God was never mentioned in their home. At that moment, I decided to stay in their house, which felt safe to me. After the Maghrib prayer, I saw her half naked, adorned and looking at herself in the mirror. By God, I found no more tempting opportunity than this, so I entered her, feeling safe and secure. She doesn't pray, she doesn't remember God, and she doesn't wear the hijab, so why shouldn't I marry her and make her my companion? At this point, the healer's face turned pale because he realized that Hasna was the one who attracted the jinn, not the other way around. However, no matter the case, she remains a servant of God, and the door of repentance is always open as long as the soul hasn't reached the throat. God created humans and jinn to worship him, not to harm each other. Here, the healer found a point to defeat the jinn and asked again, "You mentioned God several times, meaning you believe in him?" "Yes, I am a Jew from the Banu Qaynuqa tribe, but I hate your prophet and your Quran. It burns me. Please, don't recite it. I am ready to leave her body. I give you the covenant of God." The healer, with his intelligence, knew that jinn, in general, cannot be trusted, especially Jewish jinn. This is why he continued reciting the Quran without touching her or exposing her aura, private parts. Eventually, Hasna calmed down and opened her eyes. By God, this was the first time I woke up without feeling suffocated. Truly, this Quran is a blessing, and I had been depriving myself of it. The nurse and that man came in. I was so happy when I saw him, and I extended my hand to greet him. He apologized and said, "Forgive me, I don't shake hands. I wish you a speedy recovery, sister. Keep up with your prayers." Then he left. I kept looking at him until he was gone, and I said to the nurse, "Prayer and peace, why not?" He looked at me in surprise and said, "Because it's haram, forbidden, here." That's when I realized how much I needed to learn about my religion. I looked at Adele, the nurse, and asked him to bring me some books or CDs about what is halal, permissible, and haram, forbidden. The next day, I asked my dad to let me stay another month in the psychological support wing. Adele kept visiting me from time to time. Truly, life is beautiful when we are close to God. I learned that women in Islam are honored and hold a very high status. Paradise lies beneath her feet when she is a mother, and she is a righteous companion in this life and the hereafter when she is a wife. She is the reason her husband enters paradise, and she is honored and protected in her home until a man who values her comes and treats her with respect and dignity. I learned that a woman's hijab is her shield from human wolves before the jinn, and that seclusion between a man and a woman is nothing but a gateway for Satan. This is what happened to me with the fiqh. I also understood the sadness that was always in my heart. It was the songs I used to listen to. When that month passed, I left as a different Hasna, thanks to God. The month ended, and it was time for me to return home, even though I hadn't fully recovered from the relationships I had built with the other patients. I said goodbye to them one by one and looked for Adele, but they told me he had left. I felt a deep sense of loss and asked them to convey my greetings to him. Then I went home. The first thing I did when I entered the house was gather all those CDs of songs and pictures of celebrities and singers that I used to hang on my walls. In the morning, I threw them away and bought Quranic verses and religious books to decorate my home. However, the problem that remained was my mother. She didn't learn from what happened to me and was still lost in her misguidance. I would be reciting the Quran while she would be gossiping next to me. I would see her and feel so frustrated that I would grab my abaya and scarf and go to the mosque, hoping to escape her nonsense. I was so afraid that another jinn might possess me again. I knew our house was filled with devils, but my hands were tied. I kept praying to God to guide her or save me from the whispers of Satan. Eventually, God answered my prayers. One morning, I prayed far and asked God for relief. I held the Quran, read a few verses, and then continued reading a book until around 10 a.m. I got up to help the maid in the kitchen, the same maid I used to mistreat. Poor thing. Suddenly, I heard the doorbell. The maid went to open the door and came to me, saying, "There are some people here. They say they are guests of God." I told her to let them in. She hosted them in the living room while I prepared the tea tray. When I finished, she called me, and I went to my room to put on my hijab. Meanwhile, I heard men's voices. I entered, covering my head, and said, "Peace be upon you." I sat with them for a while. My father said, "My daughter, these people have come to ask for your hand in marriage for their son. He is 29 years old, a specialist in anesthesia and resuscitation, lives with his mother and older brother in a villa. What do you say?" I replied, with my eyes still on the ground, "They are welcome, but none of what you said matters to me. I need to know how his relationship with God is. I will follow the teachings of God and his messenger. If his religion and character are good, may God unite us in obedience to him and his messenger." Then I heard a voice that wasn't unfamiliar to me. A man said, "Well, the groom isn't a stranger to you, my daughter. You probably already know his morals and how he practices his religion. Lift your head and look at him. It's your right to see him as per Islamic guidelines." I lifted my head and saw the man who had healed me, along with his family, or rather, Adele. Without thinking, I said, "The nurse." They all burst into laughter. My mother said, "My daughter, I'm not lying. He's good-looking, polite, and kind, a little shy, huh?" "No, my daughter, he's not a nurse. This is Dr. Adele, the one who treated you when they wanted to perform the surgery on you." She turned to Adele and asked, "What surgery did you perform on her, my son?" Everyone fell silent, and the situation became awkward. Her son didn't say anything. I stood up and said, "Mom, the surgery they performed on me was an abortion. I lost my only child. I was raped. This is what happened." My father said, "I know his character, and he is the reason for many good things in my life. His brother, Haj Yunus, is the one who healed me when I was possessed. Even if God doesn't make this marriage easy, I will always be grateful to them. Peace be upon you." And I left. I don't know how the tears started falling. This is my destiny, and I must accept it. But Adele is a man any girl would wish for. If God hasn't written him for me, there's nothing I can do. I went to my room, wiping my tears, and after a while, I heard the sound of ululation, celebratory trilling,